Kyle Klingman with Trackwrestling. Guess who we have? 1980 Olympian, two-time NCAA champion. He is the first Iowa Hawkeye to win the Outstanding Wrestler Award at the NCAA Championships. It's Chuck Yagla. How are you, Chuck?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, Kyle.
I love that, and I'm assuming you still love that stat. You're the very first OW for Iowa.
Yes, I like that stat a lot. I think there's been a total of 10, and I always tell people somebody had to be first. I'm happy it was me.
Well, somebody had to kind of be first to get the Hawkeye Wrestling Club started. That happened in 1973, and you were there the entire time. I mean, you're still part of it, but starting in 1973, what do you remember about the formation of the Hawkeye Wrestling Club?
Well, that was my freshman year, 72, 73. Of course, that's his first year as Gary Curleymeyer's head coach, and the first year for Dan Gable as assistant coach. And I wasn't aware of I don't think there were any colleges that had clubs affiliated with them. And so they started this Hawkeye Wrestling Club in 73. And of course, Roy Carver was our big benefactor. So I don't know all the details, but I'm pretty sure he put up all the money to get it started and the initial funding for it. So it was a club that when the wrestling season got over for us college athletes, if we wanted to go wrestle in some other open freestyle or Greco-Roman tournaments, the Hawkeye Wrestling Club would pay for it.
Do you feel like it elevated your level having the Hawkeye Wrestling Club while you were in college?
Oh, definitely. Along with having the club, that brought many post-college wrestlers to Iowa City because they wanted to be around Coach Gable, and then they became part of the Hawkeye Wrestling Club too if they wanted to compete. So we had all these guys that were former national champions and former. I think some of them were probably, I don't know if they were world team members, but guys with a lot of experience that moved to Iowa City and back then they could work out with us. There were no restrictions on how they could work out with us. So that brought another, 5 to 10 guys in the room every night that were very, very tough, and you could work out with them as much as you wanted. So it really helped me get better. I mean, I tell people, back in my day, and it's probably not much different now, that when you got into that wrestling room, you either got better or you quit. I mean, it was just one of those things. Working out with, they say iron sharpens iron. So working out with those guys, day in and day out. And of course, our team was good too. So you had your workout partners that were your teammates. But the Hawkeye Wrestling Club guys really, really in my mind, made a huge difference.
During the formation of it, did you feel like that was when you caught the Olympic dream? You made the 1980 Olympic team and then made 2 world teams, one in 77, one in 79. Was that where you got the Olympic vision?
Oh, I've never really thought or figured out exactly when I got that dream. Obviously with the Hawkeye Wrestling Club, that helped because that was a vehicle for back then. You couldn't get paid and there was no monthly stipends. And the club didn't pay us to stick around. They just paid our entry fees and our expenses when we entered tournaments. But having that vehicle to do that, certainly helped. I ended up making the junior world team in 1973. That was after my freshman year. That was my first taste of international competition. And I can't say that was the start of my Olympic dream, but I'm pretty sure that had a big impact on it. I got a taste of what it was like to wrestle against, the other foreign countries and get in that environment where you're representing the United States. So, that was really, really a great experience for me. And, that's probably, a big part of the impetus of me, having the Olympic dream.
Who oversaw it? Was it Gable? Was it Jay Robinson? Someone else? Who oversaw the training of the Hawkeye Wrestling Club?
Both Coach Gable and Coach Robinson. I mean, if people know the history, Jay Robinson came there as a graduate assistant and was not officially on the staff until after Dan Gable became head coach. So I think he had a lot to do with organizing and doing stuff, around the Hawkeye Wrestling Club. He probably put more time towards that than Coach Gable back then. But this is pretty much just me guessing. We didn't have separate organized practices for Hawkeye Wrestling Club. I mean, when you went to practice, it was wrestling practice. So that's when it started. Don't want to say it was year round specifically, but that's when guys started working out. Of course, with Coach Gable coming, he always says, wrestling doesn't have a season. It's year round, which nowadays, obviously it's a lot different than it was back then. But we did not have specific organized Hawkeye Wrestling Club practices that I can remember.
And talking to Jay about this, he said that early on you could kind of work out without restrictions. Like you said, the Hawkeye Wrestling Club could work out with the college athletes. And then there was legislation on let's make sure we keep the Hawkeyes down and we keep some legislation going. Did you feel some of those changes happening over the course of your time?
None of those changes was I aware of. I was there for 10 years, 5 years as an undergrad and then 5 years as an assistant coach. And I don't know when that legislation happened, but I don't remember. I was there from 1972 to 1982. I don't remember that happening during that time. So I'm guessing it probably was shortly after that, after I left.
1980 is a unique year. Of course, it got boycotted, which is still a tragedy in our sport. But there were 3 Hawkeye Wrestling Club members, you, Randy Lewis, and Chris Campbell. Was that the culmination of what the Hawkeye Wrestling Club was meant to do?
Oh, definitely. That was a big part of what the Hawkeye Wrestling Club was for, is to get former college athletes, and particularly Iowa Hawkeyes, to make world teams and Olympic teams and become world champions and Olympic champions. So that was the whole reason behind it. And so, 3 of us making the 80 Olympic team was awesome. That's what we were going for. We would have liked to obviously have more, but it was great having 3 of the 10 weight classes back then.
How did you make a living? This wasn't like it is today. Did you have to work outside of the Hawkeye Wrestling Club? Did you stay supported? What was that like?
For me, I was fortunate because as soon as I graduated, Coach Gable, it was his second year, offered me a job as a second assistant. So Jay was he was the first assistant for Coach Gable. He was a full-time assistant, and I was also a full-time assistant, but I was the second assistant. To my knowledge, we were the first college, to have 2 assistant full-time coaches. And it was in part because of Oklahoma. Stan Abel offered me a job to go there and be the second assistant, which, I talked to Coach Gable about it, and it was, let me make a long story short, the athletic director, Bump Elliott, called me into his office and wanted to know the details of what they were offering me, and wanted to know if Iowa offered me the same thing if I'd stay in Iowa City. It didn't take me long to say yes. I mean, it was a job. It was a job opportunity, and I was probably going to be a high school coach and a high school teacher and try to continue to compete. But that's a much tougher route to take. So for me to get hired right away and be an assistant coach, a full-time assistant coach where I could get paid for that, and then also, I was coaching the team and working out with the team. So for me, it was a unique situation, and I was lucky to fall into that situation. Let's put it that way. Because others that didn't have that, they had to have some type of other job and then come to wrestling practice when they could. And hopefully it worked out. They could come, every day. But and back then, that's when some companies started having, I can't remember the name for them. They had Olympic job development programs, which these were big, large, probably Fortune 500 companies, and they would hire athletes and they would work some of the time, but then they would give them time off, to go compete or go train, that sort of thing. But I didn't have to go that route because I was assistant wrestling coach at the University of Iowa, so it worked out great for me.
Did you like the lifestyle of being an athlete and training for competitions?
Oh yeah, I always liked the training. I was one of those. I loved working out. I loved lifting weights. I didn't like running, but I liked everything else. I liked going to wrestling practice. I liked training. That I always thoroughly enjoyed that. It was just something that I think was probably, in my blood. So I liked working out and liked training and enjoyed that lifestyle. Yes.
Started there in 1973, as you mentioned, for the early days of the Hawkeye Wrestling Club, the formative days. But could you tell there were changes and it started going in a different direction as far as the culture over the course of the time you were there?
Oh yeah, most certainly. I knew a little bit what it was like before I was there because I have a brother Steve that's 2 years older than me that was on the team. I didn't obviously go down and go to practice or anything, but with Coach Curleymeyer taking over, you could tell things were changing. He was such a great promoter, and of course with Coach Gable there, those two together were a great combination because Coach Curleymeyer realized that Coach Gable is probably the one that should be running the team and running practices while he was behind the scenes promoting it and getting everything going and getting our schedule, more competitive. So you could feel each year us, it changed, the culture changing. It didn't happen overnight. It was gradually a change. Like for me personally, I came there not knowing what to expect as a freshman. And I didn't work out more than once a day my freshman year. I didn't know anybody did that. But then finally being around Coach Gable and seeing what other guys are doing, it's like, well, I guess you can put a lot more time into this than you realize. So then by my sophomore year, I started working out twice a day, every day, and just the training just stepped up. And then that kind of took off with everybody on the team. I mean, I think there were probably some guys, and I talked to them now that were, when I got there, they were juniors and seniors, and they knew what it was like, and they really didn't they tell me now they wish they would have bought into what Coach Gable was preaching, but I think they said they were kind of stubborn. It worked okay for them, before he got there. So they weren't ready to change, but now they look back and say, man, we should have realized what was going on there, and we should have bought into the extra training and the extra work and just all the things you can do to make yourself a better wrestler.
What is it about Coach Gary Curleymeyer? He was only there 4 years, but he's the architect of everything that we're talking about. What kind of skills did he have to be able to implement all of this and have the vision to do it?
That's a great question. He was just really, really ahead of his time, I think, in thinking of the innovations and the marketing of the sport. And I'm not sure where he got that or how he got that. Obviously, he was a smart man. And like you said, I really admire the fact that he waited to be the head coach. I think he was assistant for 4 or 5 years. I'm not sure the exact timeline, but then he became head coach. And then his third year as head coach, we won nationals. And his fourth year, we repeated. So in the 4 years he coached, we won 2 national titles. And then he realized that Coach Gable needed to be the head coach. So I really admire him for turning it over to Coach Gable. I think he was 40 years old at the time. I mean, can you imagine somebody nowadays that's 40 years old and just won 2 national titles in any sport and then turning it over to somebody and not being head coach anymore? I mean, I'm just looking back, it's amazing that he did that. Which, kudos to him, because obviously we know the rest is history with Coach Gable as head coach. But, I've never asked Coach Gable if, would he have stayed around another 4 or 5 years as assistant? I don't know. I'm sure there's other places probably that would have tried to hire him, but, I'm sure glad he stuck around. I'm sure glad I was a part of it.
You're consistently known as one of the nicest guys in wrestling, but did you have a mean streak when you competed?
um, I don't know if I call it a mean streak, but I think probably when I got on the mat, I was different than my off-mat personality. Let's put it that way. I think I was a tough competitor. I don't know if I'd call it a mean streak, but there was not that I wasn't going to joke around when I was on the wrestling mat. Let's put it that way.